Calder walked slowly down the tiled hallway, the worn soles of his shoes brushing softly against the cool floor. His fingers traced the edge of the wedding photo frame that sat just slightly off-center on the old wooden shelf, a photo of him and Judith smiling under the blaze of autumn maples. The frame had been moved, not by much, but enough for him to notice. He didn't say a word, just nudged it back into place. It had been a year since Judith's quiet funeral, 12 months since the house, once a sanctuary of stillness and soft conversations, was overtaken by giggling children and the artificial scent of lavender diffusers. Judith had hated lavender. "Smells like a hospital," she used to mutter. Tierney, his only daughter, had said they'd stay just for a little while their kitchen renovation wrapped up. That was 3 months ago. Now her yoga mat claimed the living room floor. Her husband Joshua's guitars leaned against the staircase, and 2 toddlers raced plastic trucks down the hallway with wild delight. They weren't bad children. They were just never meant to be in this house. Neither was the bistro curtain, or the fake fiddle leaf fig, or the sleek induction stove Judith never would have allowed near her cast iron skillet. Calder didn't protest. He hadn't protested anything. It was late fall in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The leaves outside had turned crisp and gold. The sky was dimming earlier each day. In this old 2-story house, its bones thick with Judith's memory, Calder mostly stayed quiet. When things got too loud, too changed, too not Judith, he retreated to the garage. The garage was his, uninviting to children, uninteresting to Tierney, and ignored by Joshua. It still smelled like motor oil and dry cedar. There, among scattered tools and brittle instruction manuals, sat the Mercury Marquis, 1985 forest green, slightly rusted. Judith used to tease him about it, said it leaked personality the same way it leaked gas. He never fixed either. One Thursday morning, Calder walked into the kitchen and found Judith's antique radio missing. In its place sat a sleek white smart speaker, blinking quietly. "Hey, Dad," Joshua said without looking up from his laptop. "I changed the Wi-Fi password this morning. Security thing." Calder nodded. "Okay." He didn't ask for the new password. Breakfast passed in clinks of cutlery and murmured corrections aimed at the kids. Tierney packed her gym bag, kissed Joshua on the cheek, and shouted something about almond milk as she headed out. The children giggled, chasing a balloon under the table. Calder sat quietly peeling a hard-boiled egg. Outside the window, Judith's chrysanthemums had been replaced with a cactus. That afternoon, he opened the old file cabinet in the garage. Inside was the leather-bound journal Judith had given him on their 30th anniversary. The front page still held her inscription in faded ink, "For the things you never said out loud." He turned the page and began to write. He copied Judith's recipe for Sunday morning bread letter by letter. His handwriting trembled. The ink smudged where his palm brushed too hard. No one saw. Upstairs, Tierney was live-streaming her yoga class in the living room, her voice echoing through the hardwood floors. Inhale. Let go. Calder stayed in the garage a long time. That night, the hallway lights flicked on with their motion sensor click. Calder stepped out in his slippers, the floor cool beneath his feet. The house was asleep, or pretending to be. He stopped in front of the photo frame again. It had shifted, just a little, just enough. He didn't get angry, he didn't even sigh. He simply lifted it with both hands, wiped the glass on the hem of his shirt, and placed it back, centered, steady, sacred. Behind him, a bedroom door creaked faintly open upstairs. Calder didn't turn around. "No one's kicking you out, Dad." Tierney said, her voice soft, like she was explaining bedtime rules to a child. "We just need a little more space. That's all, just for now." Calder didn't answer. He bent down and lifted the cardboard box filled with books, careful not to make a sound. Judith had labeled each spine in pencil, neat and faded underlined lines she loved in the margins. Calder kept them all, couldn't bear to let them go. Tierney hovered nearby, hands clasped too tightly. "It's just the kids are getting bigger and Joshua's work calls are non-stop. You know how noisy it gets in here." He nodded because that was what was expected, because it was easier than saying he remembered building that garage with his own hands in 1980. Judith had sat on the porch steps while he installed the cedar door, drinking cold soda and cheering him on. You measured that wrong, she'd laughed once. But it's okay. When you mess up, it still turns out right somehow. Not this time. That afternoon, Calder quietly moved into the garage. No suitcases, no moving truck. Just a slow procession of boxes, coats, a small reading lamp Judith had used when they were young, and a blanket she crocheted in 1992. The garage had been freshly painted Joshua's idea, a flat gray that looked like wet cement. A thin discount rug covered half the concrete floor. The lights overhead were two dangling fluorescent bulbs that buzzed when they flickered on. There were no windows. Tora, the younger of his two grandkids, peeked inside as Calder set a box down. "Grandpa's room looks like a security station," she chirped. Joshua chuckled. "Kinda does. Needs a radio and a badge, maybe." Calder managed a tight smile. He turned his back before it slipped. He placed the wedding photo on the workbench right between a rusted wrench and a can of motor oil that hadn't been opened in 10 years. Judith's smile stared back at him, radiant and out of place. "Dad locking up the main door now." Tierney called down later that night, casual. The deadbolt clicked with a sound louder than it should have. Metal scraping into metal, echoing through the paper-thin garage wall. They said it was for safety, just precaution. Joshua had said that easy way he spoke, when laying down boundaries without sounding harsh. Calder never argued, not once. But tonight the sound of the lock stayed in his ears long after the silence returned. He pulled on another sweater, settled into the camp chair beside the tool wall, and opened the leather-bound notebook Judith had given him for their 25th anniversary. The first page was blank until tonight. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote, the pen tips scratching faintly against old paper. "They think I don't need a home. Maybe they're right, I only needed Judith." He stared at the words, then closed the notebook carefully. Outside, the wind had picked up. It was Iowa autumn wind, slow and sharp, like it was remembering something too. His phone buzzed. A text from Tierney lit up the cracked screen. "Thanks for being flexible, Dad. It's just temporary. Love you." Calder didn't reply. He walked to the last box he hadn't opened, dug through it until he found the walnut frame Judith loved. It held a photo of them on the front steps. She was holding a basket of chrysanthemums. Her laugh caught mid-bloom. He placed it gently beside the wedding photo on the bench. Two frames side by side. A woman who filled a house with warmth and books and cinnamon bread. And a man who now slept between paint cans and insulation, quietly rearranging his life without protest. From upstairs, muted laughter spilled down through the floorboards. In the garage, Calder turned off the lights. The bulbs flickered out with a tired hum, and darkness settled in like an old coat. But the picture stayed lit in his memory, clear as morning sun. The diner smelled like old grease and stronger coffee. Calder slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from Garrison, who was already halfway through a burger that looked like it had seen better days. Neon lights flickered overhead, casting a faint pink hue across Garrison's bald head. "My grandson got the same treatment," Garrison said, licking ketchup off his thumb. "Pushed him out to the garage like last week's trash." Calder stirred his coffee. No cream, no sugar, just bitter heat. "But you," Garrison jabbed a fry in Calder's direction, "still got your name on the deed, right?" Calder gave a faint nod. The walls of the diner were a time capsule, photos of dusty highways, army platoons, and signed Polaroids of regulars pinned like trophies. It smelled of stories, some told too many times, others not enough. Calder remembered 1980. The road trip with Garrison to Arizona in a busted El Camino. Judith packing sandwiches and flasks of coffee. She waved them off that morning, wearing a red scarf, steam rising from her mug as she stood on the porch. "I didn't even argue with her." Garrison continued waving a fry like a flag. "My daughter, she said it was just for a few nights. Ended up being 6 months. You give 'em a hallway, they take your damn foundation." Calder let the words sit between them, soaking into the Formica tabletop. That night, back in the garage, Calder flipped open his laptop. The glow cast deep shadows on the pegboard, highlighting the outlines of old tools he hadn't used in years. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing slowly. "Quit claim, deed, reverse eviction, elder property rights, Iowa." He opened his notebook. Leather cracked at the spine. The pages smelled faintly of Judith's old cedar drawer. in the same precise cursive he once used to draft engineering reports. He wrote title remains unchanged. Original deed, Judith's will, locate copy. It was late. The house above him creaked faintly alive. He could hear Tora's nightlight clicking off the low hum of the dishwasher or toilet flushing. None of them knew he was awake. He slipped upstairs like a shadow moved through the hallway and entered the master bedroom, once theirs, now a storage space for holiday boxes and vacuum attachments. Judith had kept the important things in the safe behind her old sewing cabinet. He bent down, knelt slowly, and dialed the combination her birthday reversed. Click. Inside, next to a ceramic angel and a bundle of savings bonds wrapped in blue ribbon, lay a manila envelope. Calder pulled it out with both hands. He unfolded the document carefully. It was a photocopy, but Judith's handwriting in the margins was unmistakable, tight, elegant, deliberate. He read aloud in a whisper only the tools could hear. This house belongs solely to Calder Monroe. No transfer shall occur unless authorized by Calder. He froze, then looked lower. Another line: Calder retains full legal discretion over all property decisions unless mentally incapacitated by certified medical professional. He underlined the sentence. Then he stopped, capped his pen, and with slow, steady movement drew a heavy dot black ink sinking deep into the paper like a gavel strike in miniature. Outside wind scraped dry leaves against the garage door. Calder didn't feel the draft this time. Back at the diner, Garrison had said it like a joke, but Calder now saw it wasn't. It was a map, a mirror, a warning. And Calder Monroe engineer, father, grandfather, and lately, stranger in his own home, was drawing blueprints of his own. Calder hadn't meant to snoop. He'd only gone upstairs to return a box of Tora's forgotten toys, plastic ponies, and crumpled coloring books left strewn across the living room again. The house was quiet. Tierney had taken the kids and Joshua to the new organic grocer on Main Street, the one Judith would have called a pretentious produce pit. Calder smiled faintly at the thought. The door to Tierney's home office was ajar. The scent of lavender oil again hung in the air. It clashed bitterly with the faint trace of Judith's favorite cinnamon sachets, still tucked into coat sleeves and kitchen drawers. He set the box down. His eyes caught the desk drawer's slightly open metal, glinting in the afternoon light. It was the keyhole that stopped him. Judith had always said, if someone locks something in their own home, they're hiding something they're not proud of. Calder stood still for a long minute. Then his hand reached into the flower vase on the shelf, the emergency key still taped to the bottom. She hadn't changed everything. The drawer creaked. Inside, a stack of Bill's school newsletters, an unopened envelope from a law office in Des Moines, and one letter, folded neatly, addressed to Attorney Lowell. He hesitated. His thumb brushed the crease. He opened it. Dear Mr. Lowell, I'm writing to inquire about a legal pathway for transferring partial or full ownership of my father's house at 128 Bellwether Lane, Cedar Falls. While he is currently residing there, we are seeking an option that will allow for refinancing or equity loan application without the risk of future occupancy disputes. I want to clarify that this is not about evicting my father. We are simply trying to secure our family's financial future and his presence in the home, particularly in its current non-contributory state, might negatively affect the appraisal. Calder sat slowly in the desk chair. His chest rose and fell once. The paper trembled in his hands. He read the paragraph again, and again, in its current non-contributory state. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He simply folded the letter back precise along its original creases. Judith had always believed people show their truest faces not when they're loud, but when they whisper. He replaced the envelope, closed the drawer, slid the key back into the vase. Downstairs, the clock ticked softly. Wind brushed the porch eaves. Back in the garage, Calder hung his coat on a hook. The air smelled of motor oil and cedar. His hands reached for the worn leather notebook. He uncapped his pen and wrote in slow, careful strokes. Not about comfort. Not about space. Not about noise. They don't want me here. And it's not because of anything I've done. It's because I remind them of what they're afraid to become. He underlined the word afraid. Then, flipping through the notebook, he added another page this time, filled with website links hastily scribbled: Cedar Falls, propertyrights.org, iowaseniorhousinglaws.net, legalaidforelders.org. At the bottom, one bold line: Submit violation report. Home ownership interference. He clicked the tab on his browser. The screen blinked. He filled in the form quietly, steadily. Full name: Calder Monroe. Address: 128 Bellwether Lane. Nature of violation: family attempting unauthorized equity control, coercive cohabitation strategy. Legal homeowner status confirmed via deed and surviving spouse rights. He hesitated for half a second, then pressed submit. A soft ping. Confirmation. Outside, the sun dipped behind the maples. In the fading light, Calder retrieved the wedding photo again. This time he didn't place it on the toolbox. He pinned it to the garage wall right above his workbench. Judith, smiling, stood next to him in that faded blue dress, her hand on his chest. "Not yet, Jude," he murmured. "But I'm waking up." "Just a market check," Joshua said lightly over dinner, cutting into his pork chop, as if he hadn't dropped a bombshell. "You know, see what the place is worth. Nothing serious." Calder didn't look up. He just nodded and chewed the dry green bean on his fork. From the other end of the table, Tierney chimed in without looking at her father. "It's what people do now, Dad. Smart financial planning." Smart planning, Calder thought, tracing a grain in the wood of the old dining table. It was Judith who insisted they buy this house in the early 80s, back when the roof still leaked and raccoons lived in the attic. She used to say the only asset that mattered was the one you built memories in. Now that asset had a Zillow profile. He excused himself after dinner, citing a headache. No one protested. Back in the garage, the room they swore was temporary now. Home to his caught tool chest and a narrow shelf with his shaving kit. Calder turned on his laptop. The machine groaned as it woke. A soft glow spilled over his glasses, lighting up the lines of fatigue across his face. Folder after folder, he opened PDFs. Judith had scanned years ago. Insurance renovation receipts, utility ownership records, warranty contracts, and most importantly, the original deed. It still had her maiden name typed under spouse. He clicked open another file. The scanned copy of Judith's will. In paragraph 4, clear as print, was the clause: "The property at 1820 Laurel Bend is to remain under the legal discretion and management of Calder Joseph Monroe until such a time as he voluntarily relinquishes said discretion." He smiled, but it wasn't joy. It was a slow, measured tightening of purpose. Next to the laptop, his worn leather notebook lay open. He added 2 short lines. "They think silence means surrender. It doesn't. It means calculation." He drafted a letter methodical and stripped of emotion to Lowell and Associates Legal Counsel from Calder J. Monroe. R.E. Notice of Testamentary Discretion. Per attached documentation and in accordance with paragraph 4 of the late Judith Monroe's last will and testament, please be advised that I retain full legal discretion over the property located at 1820 Laurel Bend. Any attempt to engage in property reassessment, equity extraction, or title modification without my express written consent is legally void and will be challenged accordingly. Sincerely, Calder J. Monroe. He printed 2 copies. One he signed in pen, placed into an envelope, and left unsealed on the garage desk. The second he attached to an email CC'd to Lowell, the HOA property officer, and his own archived inbox. The subject line: Notice of Owner-Occupant Enforcement, Monroe. The email was terse and professional, but the weight behind it was anything but. The next afternoon, the HOA's response arrived sterile and efficient. "Thank you for your submission. Our records have been updated. Current and sole legal ownership is listed under Mr. Calder Monroe. No further property actions will be initiated without direct approval from Mr. Monroe." He printed that too. At breakfast the following morning, Calder arrived last as usual. Tierney had already plated scrambled eggs for the kids and was busy scrolling through her phone. Joshua had earbuds in, sipping his black coffee, reading something on his tablet. Calder set the folded HOA letter on the kitchen table. No fuss. No announcement. He slid it under Tierney's mug, where the condensation ring began to soak into the top fold. "I think someone left this for you," he said, his voice neutral, almost gentle. Tierney glanced down, brow furrowed. She unfolded the paper slowly. Her eyes scanned it once, then again. Her face didn't change much, but Calder saw it. The slight shift in her jaw. The pause in her breath. "I thought you weren't into email," she said finally. "Judith set it up for me," Calder replied, reaching for the coffee pot. "She always planned ahead." He stirred his coffee slowly. No sugar, just the way Judith used to drink it. The rest of breakfast was quiet. That evening, Calder sat back in the garage and reviewed his notebook. Stage 1 complete. They move by presumption, I move by paper. He underlined paper 3 times, then looked up at the wall, where the photo of Judith now hung a quiet guardian between oil-stained wrenches and shelves of old paint cans. "I miss your noise," he whispered. He didn't need noise to win, just silence, ink, and time. "Dad, can you sign this form?" Tierney asked, her voice measured, almost cheerful. She placed a paper on the kitchen table between them, the kind that looked intentionally mundane, columns, check boxes, and a polite header, authorization for joint property management. Calder didn't move. He studied the page with a stillness that made Tierney shift in her seat. "Did you read carefully who is supposed to sign here?" he asked quietly. Pointing to the bottom line labeled "Current Sole Owner." Tierney hesitated. "It's just a formality," she said. "This way we can manage the refinancing together if we ever decide to." He cut her off with a gentle tap on the table. "Tierney," he said, "formality is often just a mask for intent." The morning light poured in through the wide kitchen windows, washing over the dining table where Calder had arranged a quiet war of paper. One by one, he opened a folder and laid them down like playing cards. "This," he said, placing the copy of Judith's will, "is the original deed transfer, signed by both of us in 2003. You were at college then, if I remember right." Next came the letter from the HOA. "They updated their records," Calder continued. "They now recognize me as the sole legal occupant and owner." A property tax assessment from last year followed, then the insurance documents, all signed by Calder and Judith. "Not one of these includes your name," he said. "Not unkindly. And not one of them can be altered by someone who calls me a burden." Tierney flinched. Her mouth open-closed, and then she looked at Joshua for support. But Joshua, always more comfortable avoiding conflict, stared down at his coffee, swirling it slowly. In the silence that followed, Calder leaned back, hands folded across his chest. His reading glasses glinted in the sun. Behind him on the wall, the wedding photo he'd rehung last night seemed to anchor the moment, Judith in her lace dress, smiling, her hand looped through his arm. "I didn't mean," Tierney began, voice suddenly thinner. "But you did," he replied gently. "Or maybe you meant something you didn't have the courage to say plainly. That's always the more dangerous kind of cruelty." Across the table, 6-year-old Tora squirmed in her chair. "Is Grandpa mad?" she whispered to Eli, who was clutching a half-eaten piece of toast. "No, sweetheart," Calder said, softening. "I'm just telling the truth. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to do that without shouting." Tierney stood abruptly. "Dad, I was just trying to help everyone feel secure about the future. By replacing me in it." Her breath caught. Joshua finally spoke. Let's take a breath. Nobody's trying to push you out, Cal, but they already did." Calder said, his voice low. "The day you locked the house door from the inside and left me to sleep next to a can of turpentine." There it was, spoken without fury, but it landed heavier than shouting ever could. Tora looked up at her grandfather, wide-eyed. Tierney sat down slowly, hands clasped. Her face was pale. After a long pause, she said almost inaudibly, "Yes, sir." Calder blinked. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the way she said them. Like a daughter who suddenly remembered her father was a man. Like a woman who realized she'd been acting from fear, not love. He nodded once. "Thank you," he said, rising from his seat. He picked up the folder and returned the papers inside. Then he turned to the 2 children, the corners of his mouth lifting. "This afternoon," he said, "I'm going to teach you how to make your grandmother's molasses cookies. The real kind, not the ones from the store." Tora's face lit up. "With the cinnamon sugar on top?" "That's the one." Tierney looked away, blinking quickly. Calder didn't press it. The battle wasn't over, maybe it hadn't even properly begun. But something had shifted. For the first time since Judith's passing, Calder had taken back the room, not through shouting, but by simply being unmovable. And for the first time in weeks, the kitchen felt warm. The apartment came with one fork. One dull, slightly bent stainless steel fork. Calder found it tucked into the utensil drawer between a crumpled takeout menu and a sticky note that read, "Don't use backburner gas leaks." He smiled. It was perfect. The place smelled like fresh paint and something older, something that lingered in the wood beneath the laminate, maybe sorrow, maybe just onions. He didn't mind. The apartment was small a studio, but it was his, or at least leased under his own name, free of oversight and legal debates. And for now, that was enough. Outside, the winter wind hissed at the windows, rattling the frame. Calder set the kettle on the front burner, the safe one, and waited as the hum of boiling water began. A new habit, rooibos tea before noon, always in the thick blue mug Judith once bought from a roadside potter. He took it with both hands, sat down in the worn armchair he'd picked up at a thrift store on 6th and Main, and faced the small table beside the window. The photograph of Judith was propped on the sill. She was smiling in it, not posing, but caught mid-laugh. He had reframed it just yesterday, swapping the cracked plastic for a thin oak border. The color matched the legs of the folding table. She deserved that much. He took a sip and exhaled slow. Garrison showed up unannounced at noon, bearing a bag of burgers and 2 cups of lukewarm coffee. "You sell the house and don't say a word to me," Garrison said, as he walked in without knocking. "That's some stealth work, Monroe. Should have joined the Navy." Calder chuckled, unfolding one of the paper-wrapped burgers. "I learned from my daughter. She's an expert at slipping decisions past people." Garrison plopped onto the futon, careful not to spill ketchup on the single cushion. "And this is it, the Grand Escape one fork. 1 chair and a leaky stove. And no committee meetings, no scheduled wellness checks. No one suggesting I give up my truck for safety reasons," Calder added, grinning. They ate in companionable silence for a while, chewing through the weight of the past weeks. Calder could feel the peace settling over him like a blanket, not thick enough to smother, but just enough to ease the chill that had lived in his spine since the day Judith died. "So you left without telling Tierney?" Garrison finally asked. Calder nodded. "Left a note. Nothing bitter, just said it was time. And that I hoped one day she'd understand the difference between love and possession." Garrison whistled low. "Damn." After Garrison left, Calder pulled the small leather notebook from the drawer beside his bed. It had been Judith's, once filled with recipes in her handwriting, later overwritten with quiet musings in his own hand. A journal of sorts. A place where grief became ink. He turned to the last page and wrote Judith, "I made it. I'm okay now. The house is gone, but the home never was. The walls, was it? It was you. And now it's this cup of tea, this single fork, and the sound of wind at the window. I'm okay." He closed the notebook and rested his hand on its cover for a beat. Then 3 knocks on the door. Calder stood, joints protesting slightly, and opened it. A young woman stood there, no more than 17, maybe 18. She had chestnut hair in a messy braid, a denim jacket too light for the weather, and eyes that mirrored his own. "Mr. Monroe," she asked, voice soft but steady. "Yes." She smiled nervously. I think you're my grandfather." Calder didn't speak at first. Not from shock, but because his heart had begun to thud in a rhythm it hadn't known in years, hope hesitant and raw. The girl pulled something from her pocket. A photo, black and white, creased down the middle. Judith holding a baby. Next to her, a woman Calder didn't recognize, tall, stern, unmistakably Tierney's biological mother. A brief mistake of a marriage gone before it began. "My mom said she wasn't ready, but she kept this," the girl said. "I waited until she passed to come find you." He looked down at the image, then back up at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia." He stepped back from the door. "Would you like some tea, Sophia?" "I only have 1 fork, but we can work around that," she grinned. "I'd love that." Inside, he poured the last of the hot water into the mug and pulled down a chipped ceramic bowl from the shelf. He split the last scone in half, handing one side to Sophia with a small smile. They sat side by side at the little table, her legs swinging slightly beneath the chair, his grounded and still. The snow had begun to fall outside, slow and quiet. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I've learned that's not always a bad thing." The fork clinked softly against porcelain. Judith's photograph watched over them. And somewhere in the silence, something old gave way to something new. The apartment was quiet when the knock came. Not the urgent rap of Garrison with takeout, not the hesitant tap of Sophia. This one was deliberate, almost shy. Calder opened the door to find Tora standing in the hallway, a tote bag slung over her shoulder, and something wrapped in a scarf pressed against her chest. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied, stepping aside to let her in. She moved carefully, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. Maybe she was. The scarf unraveled slightly, and Calder saw the edge of a picture frame. One corner was cracked, the glass mended hastily with yellow duct tape. His yellow duct tape, the same kind he always swore lasted longer than anything else, including superglue or apologies. Tora sat down opposite him, her eyes scanning the room. "It's peaceful here." He poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs. "Helps me think straight." She set the wrapped frame gently on the table but didn't speak yet. Instead, she looked at the photograph on the sill, the new one. Calder, Garrison, and Sophia, standing outside a burger shack with a crooked open sign and 3 empty milkshake cups in their hands. Her eyes lingered on it, lips parting slightly in thought. "I found this in the attic," she said, finally unwrapping the frame. Inside was an old photo of Judith, laughing blurry at the edges, taken the day Calder had dared her to chase the ducks in the town square fountain. The frame had fallen years ago, one corner shattered, then forgotten in a box marked garage. "I taped it up," Tora said. "Didn't feel right to throw it out," he nodded. "Duct tape's forever." She gave a half smile. Then quieter, Dad said, "A lot of things about you, about the house, about how you chose to disappear." Calder stirred his tea. "Did you believe him?" "I didn't know what to believe," she said honestly. "I was little, but I always wondered. Why would someone sleep in the garage if they were the head of the house?" He looked up at her, surprised. "That memory so small yet piercing. Because I was tired of arguing in rooms where I didn't belong," he said softly. "Sometimes silence is the only language left between people who used to love each other." Tora's fingers traced the taped corner of the frame. "I'm sorry," she said. He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, Tora. What happened between me and your parents, it was ours to break. You were just a kid caught in the blast zone." She looked down, voice small. "Are you angry?" No, Calder said. "But I chose not to stay in a place that forgot who I was." "That's not anger. That's survival." There was a long silence. The kind only morning light can hold without feeling heavy. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Tora picked up the frame again. "This is her, isn't it, Grandma Judith?" Calder smiled and something loosened in his shoulders. "Yes, that's her." Tora held the photo in both hands, staring into the woman's frozen laughter. "She looks like she laughed a lot." "She did, mostly at my cooking." Tora chuckled. "What was she like?" "She made people feel like they mattered even when they didn't think they did," he said. "Especially then." He reached out gently, nudging the frame toward her. "Keep it." She looked up, startled. "Really?" "But every time you look at it," Calder said, "I want you to remember not just who's in the frame, but who stood behind the camera, who saw her that way." Tora stared at the photo, and then slowly she set it down and walked around the table. Calder stood, unsure what she intended. She hugged him, just like that. No words, no clever lines or half-meant apologies. Just warmth. Her arms around his shoulders, her cheek pressed to his worn flannel shirt. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for knocking." After she left, the apartment felt a little different. Not louder, not busier, just fuller. On the shelf by the window, 2 frames now stood side by side. One old and taped, containing Judith mid-laugh, her joy immortalized in a split second of messy, beautiful life. The other, newer. Calder, Tora, and Garrison caught in a flash outside the burger shack, shoulders touching, mid-chew grins, wide and imperfect. Not posed, real. The old photo had once been the whole story. Now it was just the beginning.